Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, Chris. No, not Halloween. No, not Ghost. No, not George Washington. We're talking about candy.
So what is it about candy that you love? What's your favorite piece of candy?
M&Ms. I know that's not a smooth transition into our topic today, but you asked, I told you. Used to be Butterfingers, the candy bar Butterfingers,
Yeah.
but I just got tired of picking that mess out my teeth, so I stopped eating them.
You like with or without peanuts?
I'll either. I'll eat either.
See, I don't like regular M&Ms, but I'll eat peanut M&Ms all day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'll eat either. I'll eat peanut M&Ms. I'll eat regular M&Ms. I'll eat the Easter M&Ms. I like Reese's, little Reese's candies. They look like M&Ms. Skittles. Have you tried the freeze dried Skittles? Is that what it's called? Where they
No,
like puff up real big or something?
I haven't, but you are a candy connoisseur.
I don't know about a connoisseur, but I'm a candy consumer.
And see, growing up, my favorite type of, because M&Ms has nothing to do with what we're talking about today,
No.
but my favorite candy growing up were Junior Mints. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I absolutely loved. And that is part of what we are talking about today because, Ray, if only I would have been so smart and you would have been so smart to have created this idea of an M&M and or a Junior Mint or whatever it might be, we would be rich today and
Yep.
we would just be living in Cabo or who knows doing whatever we would be doing. But there's always a beginning story to specific types of candies. And what's fascinating to me is that the beginning story of candies such as sugar daddies or Junior Mints, that the person responsible for that also finds his way being involved in politics, and he just happens to be someone that was born right here in the beautiful state of North Carolina.
Yeah, you're talking about Robert Henry Winborn Welch Jr. That's a name you're not going to sign quickly. Born right at the turn of the century. He is born December 1, 1899, right at the turn of the century. Let's see, William McKinley is president. Uh, it's a they're coming to the end of the 19th century. He makes his money, his wealth, as you say, on the candy business. And he becomes, as you mentioned, a very controversial figure. And I think we do have to come back at some point, Chris, and look at some of his political activities after
Yeah,
he leaves the candy
absolutely.
world.
Yeah. And, he makes his way in, he's born in Chowan, North Carolina, Chowan County,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of eastern part of North Carolina. And what's fascinating is he was homeschooled.
Yeah, he
His
was.
mom was a school teacher and he was homeschooled. And at the age of 10, this is what you can do with homeschool. At the age of 10, he's entering high school. And it's not long that he begins to get admitted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill
Yep.
at the ripe age of 12.
Mm.
I
I
can
can't imagine.
honestly, I mean, you are trying to grow into just understanding who you are at the age of 12. But here is this young man who becomes the youngest student to ever be enrolled at Chapel Hill. And
To
add to
this
this,
to this day.
to this day, and
Yeah.
add to it that he was not a popular kid. He really wasn't liked by many people to the point where, if I'm not mistaken, he stated that he just had a hard time identifying with people, getting to know people, and some of that might have been his very staunch views on things. He's a fundamentalist Baptist. He has some out there ideas and not really well liked when he's trying to present his views.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm trying to think of a 12-year-old in a college class, and I think, we both teach for the same college, and we have dual enrolled students who were 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. And, these kids are what, 14, 15 years old and above. And sometimes I think, how could I have been enrolled in a college class at 15, 16 years old and been successful? And the answer is no. But these kids are doing that. But yet you have this guy in, what was it, the 19 teens, who is enrolled at Chapel Hill at 12 years old. Did he graduate from Chapel Hill?
So he enrolled at Chapel Hill, but then later will actually go and enroll in the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
He even enrolls at Harvard University. And so he never really graduates because it's at Harvard where he has this illumination as far as where he's going to go in life. And number one for him to achieve his dream is he's got to quit school. And so he drops out of school and then forms his own company because he went into the business of buying a candy recipe. And he took this one little candy recipe and thought that he would be able to establish an empire with it. And he hires his brother and some other family members to be a part of it. But Ray, as anybody knows who's tried to start a business, trying to start a business is hard because, the logistics of it, the expense of just creating a business is very difficult. And then you have to have a product that is worthy of people wanting to buy it. And he finds very quickly that not too easy starting a company.
Yeah, but he does pretty good, though. By the late 1920s, his company has over 100 employees. He's doing pretty good, but he does.
It does pretty good, but it's that struggle at the beginning to try to figure out, how does he do it? And, what happens, he hires his brother, right? And then his brother kind of says, okay, I really don't want to work with you because, as everybody else has said, you're a little difficult to deal with. So his brother goes and tries to find his own company. And so next thing you know, you've got all kinds of things happening. And he's out there just living the dream.
And the death knell for the Oxford Candy Company was the Great Depression. I mean, you think about an event like the Great Depression where people are now moving to necessities. What do I have to survive? People are creating recipes based on what they've got in the cupboard or what can get at the food line or what they can get out of the garden or barter with a neighbor. They don't have the money a lot of people don't have the money to be going out spending money on fancy candies and things like that. So his company, of course, goes out of business during the Great Depression, but he doesn't stop, because it's during this time that he comes up with this caramel candy, which he came to name as a sugar daddy candy, this caramel chocolatey thing that I'm going to be honest with you right here. Let me just stop. I can't stand them. I cannot stand sugar daddies.
And the reason you don't like them is because it's just caramel that just sticks to every part of your teeth. And does it taste good? Yes. But I mean, honestly, you're enjoying that candy bar for like a whole day because you can't get it out of your teeth.
No, I don't enjoy it at all. I'm not a big caramel person. Now, does Snickers have caramel in it?
Snickers has caramel in it, yes.
I can eat a Snickers bar, but if something's got too much caramel, I don't like it. So things like sugar daddies or cowtail, things like that, I'm not a big fan of those things. But he comes up, he comes up with this product even after his Oxford Candy Company goes bankrupt. He's still working with this sugar daddy candy. He goes and he works in the Brock and Sons company. He works there in sales for a few years, again, trying to recover from the Depression. He eventually, though, he files for bankruptcy. He eventually has to file for bankruptcy because he can't get things together. And then he goes and joins his brother's company, James Welch. So Robert goes and joins his brother James Welch's company called the James O. Welch Company, and it's there where he becomes the director of sales and advertising for the company.
And so you think about that here, at the beginning, Welch brings on his brother to try
Hmm.
to help with his company. It doesn't really work. And so then brother repays the favor and brings him on to his company. And that's where they begin making the sugar daddies, as you mentioned, but they
Hmm.
also start making the junior mints, which
Yep.
is what we're talking about. And later on, that whole business will later turn into uh, being sold with Nabisco, and everybody knows the big company of Nabisco.
Shredded wheat.
Shredded wheat, crackers, you got the
Yeah.
Fig Newtons, you've got all of those things, And then what's fascinating is that company will then be sold to a company that is later part of the Pfizer group, which has like pharmaceuticals and things
Hmm.
of that nature. So you see how sugar daddies is also mixed in with pharmaceuticals.
Can I ask you a question? And I hope our audience or you don't laugh at me for this because I honestly, I know what sugar daddies are. I know what sugar babies are. I know all these candies, junior mints. I know what those are. What are pom poms? I mean, I know what pom poms are as far as like cheerleaders used to use, but what are pom poms as candy?
You know, uh, have you not had a pom pom before?
If I have, I've either called it something else or it was just never identified to what it was.
Well, the pom poms is one of those. Just it's like air kind of in it, and it's got chocolate and caramel that is mixed in, but it's like a ball that you will. Later, they kind of turn into what's known today as milk duds,
No,
and
I
I
don't like
cannot
milk
stand the
duds.
milk duds. I
I don't
cannot.
like milk duds, and I just looked up a pom pom. No, I've never had one of those, and I wouldn't have one because of the caramel and stuff. So no, I've never had one. That's why I don't. That's why I don't.
And it later becomes part of Tootsie Rolls. Remember the
I
Tootsie
don't like
Rolls?
Tootsie Rolls either.
It's all coming together.
This episode is candy Ray doesn't like.
Well, which you started by talking about how much you enjoy candy, and so now you've
I
got,
do, but certain types
as long as it
apparently.
doesn't have caramel.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But is it? Go ahead.
what I was just going to say, but you see how it starts to have these, and it's the way that business works. You have sugar daddies, and then somebody else comes along and says, okay, well, let's make a pom pom, and then that comes on and says, well, let's make a milk dud, and then so you have the same thing, but it's different shape, different size, different package. But this this trend, if you will, leads to why we have 30 million different types of pieces of candy. And everybody might not like a pom pom or a milk dud, but they might like a Snickers. Well, what's the difference? It's all about the ingredients that are in it.
Yeah, yeah. It's just the individual ingredients, how much of the ingredients you have. So he joins his brother at the James O. Welch Company, and he becomes director of sales. They start mastering these recipes for these new candies, and he eventually retires. He retires in 1956, and he retires, as you can imagine, Chris, a very wealthy man. I mean, he's made a lot of money off of these candies, and it proves that you know you give the customer something they want, they'll buy it. And he was giving people something they want, i.e., good candy, and they buy it. Even today, Welch's, I know they make like gummy bears and things like that today, so it's still there.
And so he retires, still got a lot of life waiting for him.
Oh
And
yeah.
instead of just kind of retiring to the privacy of just enjoying life, he then begins to become involved in a lot of community activities. And it gives him a chance to renew a lifelong history that he had had about politics. And
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, the idea that this is, going to start beginning. There's this problem of communists that are within our country. And, he is a strong anti-communist. And now that he's able to spend his time, yes, he serves as the director of a bank. He gets on a school board. He becomes director of chambers of commerce. He does all of these different things. But what he really begins focusing on is all of these conspiracy theories that are related to communism.
Yeah, and this is a time, if you're talking about, the 1950s, you're talking late 1950s, you're talking 1960s. This is a time when you have, the Cold War, and America's involved by the 1960s in Vietnam, and that's all about preventing the spread of communism. And then you have McCarthyism, where they're looking for Nazi. I mean, not Nazis. They're looking for communists in American government, in entertainment, et cetera. Of course, if you know, Lucille Ball gets caught up in that kind of thing, as does a lot of other people. So,
Well,
um,
even Reagan gets
yeah,
Ronald
well,
Reagan gets involved in all of that stuff.
yeah, Dwight Eisenhower is actually targeted by the society, the John Birch Society, which Welch goes on to found. They actually target Dwight Eisenhower of all people. I mean,
And
targeting Ronald Reagan and Dwight Eisenhower. That's, you know, two of
well,
the
this
most.
becomes such a broad initiative of him that he even starts meddling in world affairs. He
Yeah,
travels over to China and becomes involved with Chiang Kai shek, who was kind of the antithesis, if you will, of Mao Zedong. And, he is trying to form an alliance with Chiang Kai shek to really propagate this whole philosophy of anti-communism and to really shut down communism in the world. And I thought it was interesting that he will actually write a magazine or begin a magazine called One Man's Opinion, in which he is trying to get Chiang Kai-shek and others into his, I guess, partnership, and it becomes a nuisance to a lot of people. Um, he and I don't even know how to say it because he even denounces the desegregation movement.
yeah.
He is a strong disagreement with Brown versus Board of Education
Mm-hmm.
because he thought it was all based on communist
Mm-hmm.
ideas. And you sit there and think, how could this man, you know, equate Brown versus Board with this idea of communism? But I think, he might have had too much sugar daddies and too many because all the sugar gets to his head and he starts really going off the deep end with
Yeah.
some of his views and some of his beliefs to the point where he even decides that he needs to create a movement, if you will, that will try to, quote, make America a true republic, not even a democracy.
Yeah, and I mean his movement, the John Birch Society, the movement still goes on today. You can certainly see aspects of it in things like the moral majority in the 1980s. You can see some of the Republican activism of the 1980s, 1990s, and even on here to the Trump administration that we're in the midst of today. You can see aspects of his thinking that shows up in these other subsequent movements and these other subsequent political figures that come along, which is not surprising. I mean, that's what happens. He was involved with William Buckley, and of course, Buckley is very influential in what came along later as far as the Republican, sort of the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s to today version of the Republican Party.
And it's fair to say that he was not in favor of federal government. He not want federal government to be in control. He was a strong supporter of states' rights and said that states' rights should supersede any part of federal government. And if we pay attention to current society, we see with the abolishment or the want to be abolishment of the Department of Education and sending all of education back to the states. You look at Health and Human Service. You look at all of these slashing
Right.
of these federal offices with a desire to send things back to the state. You can still see some of Welch's ideas back then starting to creep back into mainstream society today under the current administration. It just, he even does not agree with the United Nations. He basically
Yeah.
wants everybody to take care of their own. It's not our responsibility to worry about what China's doing or India or anything else. We need to take care of our own, but we're also going to take care of our own in a specific way as well.
Yeah, he certainly, he started out, you know, a very dedicated businessman, a man who had a candy recipe that he was determined to see become part of a successful business. And then, he goes, gets out of the candy business, and things sort of go in a different direction. And, going all the way back, maybe you could see this early on with him, is that he is, like you said earlier, a staunch independent Baptist or fundamentalist Baptist, not independent Baptist, staunch fundamentalist Baptist. He calls himself a nuisance, admitting that he, got on people's nerves. I can relate to that. No comment, Chris.
Okay.
But no, you can see, his political views of stuff developing even when he's in the candy company, and he's doing that. You can certainly see where he was going with that. But bring this back around to candy. I don't think his political views should have anything to do with whether or not people enjoy candy from Welch's company today.
No, but I think it also shows that, one man really created a movement that even in existence today is still creating waves within the forms of government. And so I think it is important for us to look at this. I think we'll do a separate episode on the John Birch Society, because then you start getting into some weird conspiracies, but also I think our listeners will appreciate how it ties into today's society as well. It is funny that Welch would never talk about how big his organization, his society would be. He sometimes would say it was hundreds of millions of people that were in there, and but the fact that he was so secretive, and also that he was so troubling, controversial, led many people to discount him, but then also discount some of his products. Sugar daddies is still in existence today, and thin mints are, junior mints are, but the person behind those things, if he would have just stopped with candy, Ray, he'd been okay.
He'd have just stopped with candy, he would have been okay. I still wouldn't have been a fan of the sugar daddies. I still wouldn't have liked. I don't like Cowtails. I don't think Cowtails or Tootsie Rolls are put out by Welch, are they?
No, Cowtails aren't, but I'll say I don't like caramel, but a Cowtail, when you get that white creamy, that stuff that's it, oh my gosh, I can have one, but I agree with you about the caramel. It's tough.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Well, we hope our listeners have enjoyed this episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. We hope you will check us out on YouTube. We have all of our episodes on YouTube from when we began this podcast. Chris, this podcast has been going on for 5 years now? Because we started in 2020 in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I remember us sitting in that classroom, Chris, and we were divided by remember that glass wall?
I still remember in the dungeons where we were. When we were those things.
Yeah. So we've been going on this episode for 5 years. This podcast for 5 years. All of those episodes, the ones we're proud of and the ones we wish nobody would listen to, all of those episodes are out there. We hope you will go to YouTube, Anchor, FM, Spotify. We're out there on some other platforms as well, but definitely go to YouTube. Check us out, subscribe, comment. I've been going through recently, responding to some comments that people are making. So I hope you will take time to do that. Share the podcast with your family and friends.
Can I just say, to have a write back from Dr. Ray Shepard, my friends, if you're listening to this podcast today, would you please do us the favor of just submitting a comment so that you could receive words from the illustrious Dr. Ray Shepard, who, by the way, as you did not know, now you do know, he detests caramel candies.
Yes, I do. Everybody could tell me why I'm wrong. No, that's great. I enjoy seeing comments, whether it's on Facebook, getting more comments on YouTube. So we hope people will continue to do that.
And let us know where you're from.
Yeah, let us know where you're from, what episodes you like, what episodes you don't like, what you'd like to see us focus more on. We're always anxious to hear that. So until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
We'll talk to you later.